Hello everyone, my name is Dmitry Vostokov and I introduce Software Narratology today. This is the version 1 of the webinar in order not to overwhelm you with concepts if you are not familiar with narratology. So I decided to keep this presentation as simple as possible and gradually introduce you to the concepts. These prerequisites are very simple and I suppose you all enjoy reading stories. The whole new discipline was born because I needed to convince myself to enjoy reading software traces and event logs. Let's analyze this story fragment from some fiction. After a long search, a hero found a castle and tried to open its gate. It's closed. The hero needed a key. Let's break the story into the sequence of events. First a long search, then a hero found the castle, then the hero tried to open the castle gate, and the gate is closed, so the hero needed a key. So we see these events, and also from these events we can construct any representation, such as a text we read previously, or it can be a movie or a graphic. Now consider this real software story. After a long computation, a component ABC tried to save computed results in a file. Access denied. The component needed to have certain rights. You see, it sounds very similar to the previous fictional story, and you see the component ABC plays a hero role. The file is the castle, and access right is the key. If we break our software story into software-defined events, we get a software trace or event log. Where did this narrative come from? Who does create such narratives? Software developers add code during software construction phase to generate such event descriptions during software execution to assist themselves and more often other people in problem solving such as software troubleshooting and debugging. However, during software post-construction phase, a user runs the program, it gets an empty file with results. The user opens a support case, and then Then a software engineer modifies code to add some events. This could also have been done during the software construction phase in anticipation of possible future software problems. We come back to this anticipation shortly. Now a bit of history. Please also note that this is itself a historical narrative, a sequence of events and state-of-mind changes. Earlier in 2009, I was trying to make sense of software trace analysis. Historically, I started with full-time memory dump analysis more than 8 years ago. After some time, I had to analyze very complex software logs with millions events from dozens of processes, hundreds of components and threads. There was no time to learn millions of source code lines as well. If in memory dumps, the problem was always immediately visible to me due to numerous patterns, then in software logs it wasn't. So I started discerning trace analysis patterns to help me with trace analysis. However, I came to pattern writing block, as there were not so many discernible product-independent patterns. During the fateful interview about tracing tools, I was asked about how to explain software traces to a general software user. Fortunately, a few weeks before, I started reading few books on literary theory and criticism which mentioned the notion of narrative. So all this came to my mind and I explained software tracing as stories of computation. After that, I came up with the first definition of software narratology as application of narratology to software traces and logs. All subsequent product-independent trace analysis patterns, almost 50 of them, were discerned using this narratological perspective. During the next 2 years, I've been reading a lot on literature and came up with an idea to extend software narratology to the whole domain of software, including software construction phases. This is a software narratological square where the top row deals with software post-construction phase and the bottom row deals with software construction phase. The left column deals with software implementation aspects and the right column deals with requirements and use cases. In this introduction, we only discuss the top left square related to post-construction software stories, relevant to software users and technical support and maintenance personnel. Other squares will be discussed in subsequent expanded versions of this introduction. The concept of a software NREM will be introduced shortly. Now we briefly discuss yet another aspect of narrative, its representation. The events of the whole full story, also called fable or fabula, can be rearranged in numerous ways to create various plots, with suspension as in fiction thrillers, also called sujets. Before or during software execution, the generation of certain event categories can be switched off or on. When engineers analyze software traces and event logs, they hide certain events in their tools in order to reduce the size of the trace to be analyzed or being analyzed. So we get different software plots or sujets from the possible full software story or fabula. But every individual plot can be presented differently, for example, in a novel or a poem or even in a movie. The same goes for software stories as well. Additional useful concept from narratology is a concept of a paratext. This is additional information about a text useful for its interpretation, such as a book cover, an introduction from an editor, notes, or the list of other referenced text, such as bibliography, and so on. I put some Wikipedia links as well, so when you get PDF file, you can go and read more about some concepts. This leads to the concept of paratext. It leads to the concept of an extended software trace that includes supporting information such as pictures, videos, accounts of scenarios, and past problem histories, user interviews, all what is necessary to understand a software incident and lead to a problem resolution. Now we come to a basic unit of software narrative. Here we don't consider a syntactical unit such as an event, a message. Such basic units need to have a semantic aspect as well if it is of any use. So we are in the process of their identification, and some examples, NARIM examples, include enter-exit messages or request-reply messages and so on, and I provide the better list later on my blog and portal. However, there are three basic software NARIM types that you can see from any trace or event log: state report, action report, and the commentary. We have already seen that the study of fiction helps with structuring and understanding software stories, at least software traces and event logs. So is the other way around, and software narratology and its patterns help with understanding fiction and other types of narratives such as historical narratives. Moreover, it can help with fiction writing. If you like science fiction, then you are probably familiar with the novel of Philip K. Dick, The Man in the High Castle. It is a known fact that the author used a fiction-creating device, an ancient Chinese book, I Ching, to guide story construction. So we can use various software traces to create story and plot fragments. We just need to replace components, processes, and threads with various agents and institutions. So, as in fictional or literature, narrative, we have software narrative genres, and of course different platforms and products, they use different formats for software logs and traces, and how they are presented. This all can be classified into different software genres. A bit more terminology is narrative isomorphism. So different software traces, software stories can be isomorphic if there is some correspondence with their narrative structure. And software narratology strives to discern what is common to all software stories. For example, so far we have identified almost 50 patterns. Now we come to software computer diagnostics. Software diagnostics now is fragmented across products, technologies, and vendors. Different products have different diagnostic report formats. Even when a certain diagnostics technology is used by different software vendors, the same technology, such as event tracing for Windows, for example, reporting formats and styles differ greatly and in ad hoc manner. A unified approach is needed that doesn't mandate rules but takes into account the diverse nature of computer diagnostics. And we believe that software narratology is such an approach. So what are benefits of software narratological approach? Such benefits include anticipatory software construction and product-independent software problem solving. Here we use the term anticipatory in the sense of annotation of your code annotation. So when you annotate your code with software events in such a way as to help with software trace analysis. So you think ahead what can be useful to add to software tracing in your code to help, for example, completely different people who later come and troubleshoot and debug your code. Product independence uses narrative isomorphism, genre aspects, software trace, norms, and patterns to analyze software traces and logs in the similar way, regardless of software platforms, technologies, products, and vendors. By looking at software traces as narrative stories, a software engineer would better anticipate the needs of software maintainers and technical support and escalation engineers by constructing better event descriptions. So what we mean by anticipatory software. And so come product independence. Software narratological perspective gives you a unified framework of patterns to look for when analyzing software traces and logs from diverse products, platforms, and technologies. Knowledge of trace analysis patterns gives and lowers a learning curve when you transition to maintain and support a different product. In tiered support organizations, such as when you have tier 1, 2, 3, it provides a unified pattern language to report and discuss diagnostic reports and alerts, problem incidents, and their artifacts. So here I put further reading references. There are two basic introductions to narrative that I found useful. And I also include links to the emerging software narratology. Some edited articles started to appear in volume 3 of Memory Dump Analysis Anthology, and I'm now working on volume 6 that will have some articles, and volume 7 will have more articles that is planned by the end of 2012. And please also look at presentations, software tracing, memory dump analysis, patterns, tools, processes, and best practices. It shows some examples from software trace analysis and patterns. So I try to keep this presentation short. And I also very interested in how to improve this introduction. So please send your comments and suggestions. If I can't answer your questions now, I then post it on Memory Dump Analysis Services website later this week. So if you have any questions now, please ask. So if you have any questions, please ask now. I think, yes, there was a problem with mic. I think I restored it. So there's one question, how you will define an REIM. I define a REIM as a basic unit of narrative out of which you can construct or reduce narrative. So, and it has not only syntactical part but also semantic part as well. And my NARIM definition may be different than the one you can find, for example, in Wikipedia, because this NARIM for narratives was introduced, I think, in 60s or 70s, and in 70s there was a search for such NARIMs, but it wasn't very productive. But for software stories, because they are more computer-oriented, the concept of a software NARIM might be more productive. So as I showed in one showed that software NARIM is basic unit of software story, software narrative that has some syntactical aspects and also some semantical aspects. For example, enter, exit, or request reply. So the concept of a software NARIM takes into account the nature of software. Regarding books to recommend, if you like to read literature, fiction, and interested in narrative, that's on the previous slide. I put 2 books, an introduction to narratology and the Cambridge Introduction to Narrative. You can find them, I think, at research. They are widely used when people study narrative. So did I answer clearly or define a NARIM or software NARIM? There's a question about have I attempted to automate narratology for software, I believe. Yes, I've been working on a project called STARE, Software Trace Analysis Report Environment, that tries to discern automatically software trace patterns. But I report the progress on this project separately. So if you have any other questions, please ask. The project that I mentioned The project that I mentioned, it was initially conceived for Windows, not necessarily 32-bit, but 64-bit as well, but it doesn't matter any for software traces. It's completely platform and product independent. But of course, the initial version that going to be released eventually will probably based on Windows as initially, but their approach and all architecture and everything can be used on any platform. And based on any platform and used for any platform. And I provide publicly some insights later on. So this is answering your question about this tool. Yes, of course, this is general tool. But some specific aspects also covered, because in addition to general patterns, of course, when you analyze software traces and event logs, some platform specific or product specific content can be discerned and added as well. So the tool needs to be general, but it also needs to be useful for specific projects and technologies. And it also uses some programming language specifically created for it. It's called Narralog. I think I already mentioned it somewhere else. So if you have any other questions, please ask now. So did I answer my question about tool, the project STAIR? This is what happens. I like this name. This is what happens when we open a huge software trace. We just stare at it. It's a bit funny. And you know what happens usually when people try to analyze, software engineers try to analyze software traces they open, and they just don't know what to do, especially when you are not very familiar with source code. So, and software narratology, I believe, helps to provide some analysis to see something, uh, what what was happening during software execution, abnormal software behavior, patterns, and so on. So thank you all for attendance. If you still have questions, not necessarily related to software narratology. Any questions are welcome. So you can type them and I try later. I leave this session for some time and later provide my answers on website. So thank you again all for attending this webinar and bye-bye.